Pamela Jackson. I'm the comic arts librarian at San Diego State University. And in honor of Satanic Panic, we're going to talk some comics and how they relate to the Satanic Panic. Comics experienced a bit of a moral panic a couple decades earlier than the 80s, but then we get into the 80s. So let's look at some of those comics. So kicking things off here, I've pulled Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. So the game, of course, Dungeons and Dragons was thought to be demonic, and it taught witchcraft and Satanism, and so parents were afraid to have their kids play this game. And you can see in some of the comics those things reflected. This one particularly funny, kind of like a shaman guy there. The phases of the moon and spell games and rites. So you have a lot of demonic activity going on there. And then, of course, heavy metal music was attacked greatly. So here we have a comic featuring Ozzy Osbourne, who was, of course, criticized for biting the head off bats and promoting Satanism. We have Chick tracts, and these are little comics. Let's see here. These are little comics that were put out by Jack Chick, and they are religious comics. So they're evangelical comics, not a traditional comic book. But a lot of in the 80s and 90s, what they took on was occultism, kind of combating anything that had to do with witchcraft, the occult, all of that. And you could buy these for really cheap and leave them around everywhere. So in the 1980s, you would see Chick tracts left out in record stores or just on a table somewhere. It was a way of proselytizing. There is one called Dark Dungeons that's about Dungeons and Dragons, and unfortunately we don't have a copy of it in our collection. I am looking for an original, but it is scanned in online if you wanted to read that one. And then we get into some of the cartoon comics of the 1980s, the cartoon tie-ins. So of course we have Masters of the Universe with He-Man. He-Man was criticized by parents and religious groups for he must have gotten his powers from the devil, right? And then he fights Skeletor, of course, who kind of stands in for the devil. The comics themselves, I don't know that they were attacked, but what was attacked most was the toy line, to the point where they even said that the He-Man doll moved by itself, therefore it was possessed, and so people were afraid of the doll. The Smurfs were attacked. The Smurfs were blue, so they must be undead. And it was said that their genders and sexuality did not conform with Christian ideals. So the Smurfs were attacked. Scooby-Doo, of course, everything to do with the paranormal, so they were pushing the occult on children. And then this is a pretty good representation, I think, here of some of the early 1980s comics that are more horror-based comics. So Mephisto. Mephisto was Marvel's stand-in for Satan, for the devil. So he was usually a villain, but he also made some deals with humans. So you've got those like blood pacts and things like that. Ghost Rider sold his soul to Mephisto. So Ghost Rider was killed and then comes back as an avenging angel of sorts, or an avenging devil of sorts. Chris Claremont's run, early 1980s, of the New Mutants has a lot of storylines that start bringing into it demonic storylines and everything. And then over here, this is a 1999 cover for Doctor Strange. And it's a really controversial moment for the Satanic Panic. So Amy Grant was a Christian rock star at the time, Christian pop star. And this cover depicts her image on it. She sued Marvel, but not for copyright infringement. She sued Marvel because the image would be associated with the occult and therefore diminish her standing in the Christian community. And we don't know what it was settled for out of court. It was a sealed document, but they settled it, and Marvel had no blame in the case, so there was no liability or anything, but they did settle out of court, so that's an interesting thing there. And then we have Heavy Metal Magazine. This is an adult magazine, so it may not have been as targeted. I think for all of comics, they may not have been as targeted in the 1980s as they were in like the 1950s during the first moral panic to do with comics, because there was thought to be less children reading them. So it was more television and games and things that were being attacked. But in Heavy Metal Magazine for adults, you can see a lot of demonic storylines in here and witchcraft being portrayed, things like that. And then There's some serial killer comics here. The Nail Biter, that's a serial killer. Then there are some actual more historical ones. But did you hear what Eddie Gein done? So some comics that talk about serial killers that way. This is a modern comic, The Department of Truth. This is a really cool comic, and in it you see a scene where the character is eating a baby. And so the storyline here mimics what we saw in the McMartin preschool trials, where this small town, one of the main characters, Cole, he has this false memory of eating babies because the Satanist made him eat a baby. Then it comes out that that wasn't a real memory. His teacher didn't do that to him. But by then it was too late because the Satanic Panic had taken off and his teacher had committed suicide. And so, it shows the harms of what these false memories and that can all do. The San Diego State University Library special collection of comics. We have over 120,000 published comics in addition to ephemera and archival collections. We are open to the public, so you're welcome to come dig in, do some research in our collection, or come see things that are on exhibit. Thank you.